Welcome to another episode of Under the Barbell Strength podcast. I'm your host, Colton Haynes, and if this is your first time tuning in, we'd love for you to follow and subscribe. Feel free to leave us a comment with any questions or topics you'd like for us to cover. The purpose of this podcast is both educational and an opportunity to showcase some incredible coaches I've had the privilege to meet throughout my journey in the strength and conditioning world. I think listeners will enjoy the diverse range of guests who will share their experiences in coaching, enhancing athletic performance, nutritional strategies, speed training, and exploring the mentality of being a strength coach. By uncovering the weight room philosophies and strategies that make these strength coaches successful, you'll gain valuable principles to elevate your own team's performance. So join us as we grow together one conversation at a time. Joining us today is the head strength and conditioning coach at Shepherd University, Coach Gabe Mason. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity, man.
Man, it's going to be a good show because we got a lot in common here. We both graduated from Arkansas Tech.
Yes, sir.
Under a great coach and Coach Golden.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable experience, and I hope you had the same. I know you came in right after me, and you ended up leaving a little bit earlier than I did, so that was an awesome time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, what a great location in the GAC. I don't know if it was the same for you, but I was put in charge of a lot of teams, and so got a lot of responsibility early on. You learn as you go, you know?
Absolutely. It was a fantastic time, and you know as well as I know, Coach Golden, he'll throw you into the fire as soon as you get there. So it was a lot right off the bat coming out of some internships, but I think it was more beneficial than almost any other GA spot, and I will argue that probably until the day that I end my coaching career.
I agree because it's all about the experience. You know,
Yes, sir.
Like you said, you got thrown in day one, and I was the same way. Talk about how you got into strength and conditioning and what point of your life were you interested into it?
Yeah, man. You know, very, very much so the stereotypical strength and conditioning coach. Not a Division I athlete, high school kid looking to try to improve your performance so that you can become a better athlete, so you can stand out to get scholarships, etc. Now, I say it on every single platform that I'm on. As always, I have a twin brother that's also in performance, and he found it way before I did. And by the time this podcast comes out, he will have at least announced that he's the director at Ashland University in Ohio. So now we're in the same conference, and we're in this, sorry, not the same conference, we're in the same region. So we get to compete against one another, but he really found performance before I did. It was, again, very, very novice level stuff. But at the time, we had no idea what it was. So Mark Ripito was the master of everything. And starting strength, find 531, you find a T-Nation article, you see people post in forums about what they're doing for training, and you're like, wow, I would love to try this out for myself. And then you kind of dig yourself deeper into that rabbit hole. So not a Division I athlete, but end up playing college sports and get myself hurt. And you find performance when that happens, and you try to rehabilitate yourself. You try to find a way to make yourself a better athlete. And through the end of a college athletic career, you try to find a career that suits you. And again, very similar to everybody else, you wonder, do I want to be an athletic trainer? Do I want to be a physical therapist? And you find the realm of performance and you say, wow, that sounds much better in my opinion, at least. So you go through internship processes, and I was lucky enough that I ended up moving back home to Grand Canyon University, where I finished out my bachelor's degree, and their performance program was in its initial workings, but I ended up being the first intern for their performance department. So I was there by myself. I remember day number one, I went to meet the staff. I sent emails for weeks and weeks and weeks trying to get them to at least have a conversation with me about an internship program. And I went in one day, and his name is Sebastian Brandon. He's not in the field anymore, but he said, I'll see you tomorrow at 4:45. So that was the start of the internship program. I was there for about a year and a half. I also had a professor that introduced me to Exos Sport Performance, which is extremely well-known, high-level quality coaching, high-level quality facilities out in Phoenix, Arizona, well-known for NFL Combine Prep. And I got a summer internship over there under Nick Hill and Eric Dannenberg and Natalie Coyers, and I had an unreal time over there, and that kind of propelled me out to wondering what the future of performance would look like. And afterwards, as again, I keep saying very normalized strength and conditioning terms for everybody, but I applied to about 75 to 100 graduate assistant spots all over the country. And I heard back from about 10 of them, one of them being Coach Golden and Arkansas Tech, Russellville, Arkansas. No idea where it is, no idea what the university was at the time. Had a great interview process with him and ended up taking the spot. Got there maybe 3 weeks after I accepted the job. Spent 2 years there. Out of that one, I ended up going to Elon University as an intern when I finished, because right after COVID, all of the coaches versus COVID things were coming out. All of the information that coaches were spreading while we weren't able to be with our student athletes gave me a huge positive impression on coaches like Nick DeMarco and coaches like Jordan Newsma, who were putting out a bunch of information. So I wanted to go learn under them. I was lucky enough after an incredible experience there to get hired on part-time. And he sent me right away after 6 weeks to go work with Jeff Jones at Arkansas State. Was there for a year and a half working with football and women's basketball, baseball. And after that year, Jordan Newsma ended up moving on to another Division I university. So Nick called me back, where I was at Elon for 2.5 years, and then trying to move up the ladder, I ended up here at Shepherd running the department.
Love that. And so you talked about your experience getting into and applying. Talk about what advice you would give young strength coaches who are looking to be a GA and, apply. Should they go the intern route first? Should they be a GA first?
Absolutely. Personally, 100% would tell everybody to go and do an internship, even though the concept of working for free has been a little bit of a negative connotation within the field for right now. I think you put yourself in a very, very good opportunity and a very good position to be successful later on by offering your services to coaches in exchange for information. And that's all that you can really ask for within our field, is more information to be able to apply to the scenarios that you're in with your athletes, with your coaches. And you will find, and you obviously know this for yourself, but you'll find that coaches are very willing to give out information for free in exchange for nothing. But if you spend 10 hours a day with somebody, you're much more likely to get that information without having to ask, just through naturally based conversation and experience, rather than trying to reach out to everybody and find your own way. Now, I also would suggest that you reach out to as many people as possible and try to find your way, because the strength and conditioning community is very welcoming and it's very open to sharing, open to conversation. But getting out into a gym setting, getting out into a performance-based culture and experiencing it for yourself while not having as much responsibility is a very good introductory pathway to figure out whether you truly are passionate about performance, because you will be able to see the highs and you will be able to see the lows. You will be able to see the conversations with student athletes and with coaching staffs that can be both positive and negative, and it'll help you determine whether or not you truly want to be in the field.
Love that. And like everyone knows, you're currently the head strength coach at Shepherd University. Talk about your role there and what you oversee and do there now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am currently one director with a staff of one underneath me, one graduate assistant. We have 15 varsity sports, and I run 10 of them. I'm the director over football. I also control everything from performance to nutrition to conversation with psychological department. We have a great exercise science department at the university. We also have some on-campus health and wellness that runs some different organizational based processes with our athletic department as well. But I oversee football. I oversee men's basketball, baseball, softball, volleyball, women's soccer. I oversee women's lax. I help with women's basketball. I help with men's soccer. And then my GA has control over women's basketball and soccer, men's and women's tennis, and men's and women's cross country.
So how do you manage all the teams? Like, surely you just talked about them all. How are they scheduled in? Like, talk about the scheduling and how you manage all that.
Yep. Everybody hates the scheduling portion of it.
For sure.
I was very, very lucky when I got in here to have a very well-based communication process with the coaches and an understanding between both of us that, yes, this job is going to be very demanding. Yes, the job has a lot of responsibility oriented around it. So structuring a day and structuring a weekly schedule, a monthly schedule, a semester-based schedule has to be for the benefit of both of us. And things will have to be given and taken away from programs on the back end. So I structure most of our scheduling based off of in-season, preseason, postseason type of dates, as well as team size orientation. So football gets the number one priority, especially in the fall when they're out here. But luckily enough, their practices, their general schedule puts them in that early morning block a lot of the time. And our coaching staff has been extremely welcoming to me as well with structure of the training and structure of days in the week, structure of how often we're getting the guys in here. And it's only helped me be able to set parameters for what the schedule can look like for our other sporting teams. Some teams, obviously, you would love to train more often. You would like to see more based off of a schedule, or you would like to see get more training sessions, but weekly orientation and prioritization can be a little bit limiting based off of that. We are lucky enough at Shepherd to have technically 2 weight rooms. We have a upstairs and a downstairs in the same facility. That downstairs weight room has 7 racks. It's probably about 2,000 square feet. So it's not extremely large, but that upstairs facility is probably around that same size, maybe slightly bigger with a bit more open space. And it's connected to a basketball court on the back end. So we're really close to some open space, and we are lucky enough to be able to have multiple teams training at the same time with me and my GA both working with separate teams. So that's made the overall holistic based schedule much easier to conduct.
You said the basketball arena is attached to it. Do y'all go and do speed work out there before and then hit
All
the
the
weight
time.
room after? What's
Yep.
the general overview of it all?
Yeah, I'm a sprint-based coach. I'm a athleticism-based coach. So when recruits come in, I tell them we probably spend about 50% of our times on the court or on the field outside trying to be athletes, and 50% in the weight room trying to build resilience, trying to build our strength numbers, trying to make sure that we are structured and based on what we want from a strength and conditioning department. But having that court right there is both a blessing and a curse, because I also can't always get out onto the court, because while I have training sessions in our academic department, could also have a class in that gym reserved for a specific time frame. Our basketball team might have a practice, our women's basketball team, our volleyball team, when it's cold outside in these winter months, our baseball team, our softball team, they also use this one centralized gym space, open floor plan. So it's awesome, and it makes things very interesting and has to make me be adaptable to a day-to-day scenario. So it's exciting.
And how far is the football field from like the turf area from
Yep.
the bottom stairs?
Yeah, it's about a 5 to 7 minute drive across
So,
campus,
you can't
unfortunately.
beat.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that is the space that we have. Again, luckily enough, in that upstairs weight room, we have a overviewing tarp that kind of separates out the weight room space from the basketball court. So when I can lower out that tarp, I can lower it down, get a little bit of separation between us, so I can have a team up there. Try not to blow my whistle very much, try not to scream in anybody's faces while there are other teams around. But again, me and the coaching staffs have had very, very good communication bases for using both facilities at the same time, which has been a blessing.
Yep. And so when people are looking for jobs, there's a certain criteria they want to check off. And you kind of talked about it. Whenever I took this job, we took the job about the same time. It all had to make sense efficiently and effectively for me. So like the field being right there, like you said, the court being right there. What was the criteria for you taking the Shepherd job?
100%. I had a great conversation with the coaching staffs. For one, I loved my job at Elon. I think Nick DeMarco is probably the best director in the country, and I'm not afraid to say that on any platform in front of anybody. I think he's a fantastic human being, and it's a really, really hard place to leave. But I do think that personal goals play into effect in everybody's journey, especially within strength conditioning. And I loved my time at Elon, but I had a overarching goal of running a football program, and as much inclusion that I had at Elon with the implementation of performance-based metrics, performance-based philosophies, and coaching responsibility with the football team, I wanted to experience the overarching, really, director of the program by itself. And so when I was applying to places, that was one thing that Coach DeMarco and I talked about a lot is, does it fit with what you're looking for? Is the spacing right? Does everything make sense? And are you willing to make this jump into what is going to be leading a department? Not necessarily just a football team, but running a department. And I bring back up my brother again, but my brother was a director at the Division III level for 2.5 years before I got this. And we had plenty of conversation about the highs and the lows, the things that happen, everything from the worst to the best that you get. And I could not be more blessed to have someone like him backing me in a scenario like this, and a person to just confide in when things go right and things go wrong. And so even with all of the challenges that were put forth, he put me in a very, very good place to be successful.
You talked about Elon, that they're Division I. So talk about the Division I and Division II level? What are a lot of similarities, differences?
Yeah, I mean, from an athlete standpoint, I would say the biggest difference between Division I and Division II is what none of us can control, and it's typically genetics. I think a lot of the athletes have a lot of the same mindsets, a lot of the same passions, and as you really go down in levels from Division II, Division III to NAIA to JUCO, you see athletes that are unbelievably passionate about the sport. They just might not have been gifted with as much genetic potential as some other people. When you look at a department standpoint, obviously Division I, there's more money to go around to programs that win and to programs that don't. Holistically across a university setting, at the Division I level, the facilities are typically better, not always, but typically better, right? The spacing is a little bit better, and the overarching view of the university can be a little bit better depending on where you're at. And I'm very, very lucky that when I got to Shepherd, we also got a new athletic director, and our vision for the university, our vision for the athletic department, our vision for the strength and conditioning, sports performance realm are almost completely in line. So when you think about things that separate out universities from Division I to Division II to Division III, a lot of the times strength and conditioning can get kind of pushed to the wayside as being the weights guy on the back end. And I was very lucky that when I got here, all of the coaching staffs were very, very, very helpful to get me to a point where I want this department to be and to try to get this department working as efficiently as a Division I program. That's the goal. I want to run this place similar, if not better, to any Division I program that I've ever been at. And whatever I have to do, it makes it happen. And you try to make sure that you are providing the athletes with the best possible scenario. And if that means that you work a little tiny bit more to get more money, you talk to a little bit more people, you have a little bit more conversation, you put yourself out there a little tiny bit more, you make it happen.
And, you talked about being the D2 strength coach. You see all these different teams at the same time. How do you stay sports specific with each team? Are they doing the same thing? Kind of talk about the general overview of that.
I think the biggest scenario with that is the concept of reverse engineering the sport, the concept of working backwards from what the coaching staffs and the athletes, the general departments think that each team, each individual needs to get better. That's, again, we talked a little bit about what I tell recruits, but I tell recruits all the time that it's my job to make you the best athlete possible. And everybody's a little bit individualized with that. And so from a freshman to a potential fifth-year senior, the way that you program for them should in some capacity be a little tiny bit different if you've been doing your job, because the needs that they'll have to continue to get better at their sport are a little tiny bit different. Across teams, right? You look at metric-based style programming and trying to make sure that you understand concepts of distance traveled at high speeds, jump numbers, contact-based numbers, swing numbers, throw numbers, what a weekly schedule looks like from a practice standpoint to a gameplay standpoint. And when all of those different categories are assessed and you understand what is going to be asked of the athletes at any particular time, it does make it really, I don't want to say easy, but it makes it a little bit more simple to design a training schedule and a training block or a training day for the athletes when you look outside of just the weight room.
Yep, and so we can kind of get deeper into this if you'd like, but talk about the methods that you like to use. What kind of exercises are you using?
Absolutely. So I am, as mentioned in every podcast, I'm a very sprint-oriented coach. I truly believe, especially after my time within performance, that running as fast as we can in an often based scenarios with full recovery and basing our training week around that philosophy can be as unbelievably beneficial to athletes as any other methodology. And so I'm a Charlie Francis based type of coach. I'm a high-low model based type of coach. And I try to make sure that our athletes are set up for success from an individual day basis by making sure that each of those days does not negatively impact one another and are structured around one another. So obviously the concepts of max velocity days, acceleration-based days, deceleration days, agility days, change of direction-based days, those all play into different categories, differentiated programs for different athletes that have sports that require them to do a little bit different things. But trying to keep a high-low model within a day, we try to make sure that if there's going to be high-speed distances covered, that we're also training, particularly in the weight room, our high threshold motor unit capability producing movement patterns. So your squats, your hinges, your pulls from a lower body standpoint. A lot of that gets worked in. People talk about hamstring work all the time. A lot of our hamstring work gets done at that time. And then on our days where we're not doing those, even if we are still out on the field, if we are making changes of direction or we are in a lower speed-based oriented type of day, we can get our lower threshold-based work done, our lower heart rate-based work done, our smaller distance-based work done to try to make sure that our days aren't just impinging on one another and continuing to create stress that our athletes can't recover from.
Yep, and then talk about your sprinting belief about an in-season program.
Yeah, I'm again, the Charlie Francis model, residual training effect type of coach, max velocity, high speed work. If you don't cover it at least once every 7 days-ish or so, you're probably going to lose it. So we try to structure our training week so that the game day is the most beneficial and the most important day. So one day before that, one day after that, probably not doing very much high speed distance threshold type of work. But when I get 48 to 72 hours in between, sometimes it's on a Monday, sometimes it's on a Tuesday if we're playing Saturday games, making sure that we hit something between a 20 and potentially 40-yard sprint at max speed that we can, whether it's a fly, whether it's a full, whether it's from a 2-point, whether it's from a 3-point, kind of just depends on the athletes that we work with. Longer distance covering athletes need to be covering longer distances. Obviously, maybe your linemen get a little tiny bit different. You talk about a basketball team, maybe our bigs versus our guards have a little tiny bit of a different distance on those days, but in some capacity, trying to make sure that that day is a full high day and it covers our max distance residual, our strength-based residual, our posterior chain-based residual, and then the rest of the week flows off of that.
How do you compare that to your off season?
Yeah, as much as I can in the off season, if we're getting, depending on the amount of days that we're training within the week, as long as we have that 48 to 72 hour-ish rest time in between where we're hitting our upper body lifts or our tempo-based running, we're sprinting somewhere between 2 and 3 days a week. And each of those days, as mentioned before, has their own, I guess, philosophy around it. It has their own emphasis, high speed based days, max velocity based days, different drill based work is done on those days, different thresholds for distances covered gets done on those days versus acceleration based days. Maybe we're hitting more of our bound based plyometrics, our linear based plyometrics versus our cyclical based plyometrics. Our distances that move through shorter spaces can get done on those type of days. Our change of direction based work can get done on those days. But as much as I can, trying to match stimuluses where high complexity based patterns get matched with our high threshold based work. So max velocity and most of our agility work gets done on that same day. Most of our change of direction based work and our acceleration based work gets done on the same day. And depending on the time in the off season, let's just say, for example, this past summer, we had a month in June where we trained 4 days a week. That Tuesday and that Friday were our high based days. That Tuesday was followed by a Wednesday off day, and it's coming off of a 2-day weekend and an initial training day on Monday that is low and a little bit upper body based. We did some shorter distance tempo based running. So I'm probably running my max velocity work on that day because I know I have a full off day afterwards. I know I have a second lower day that's going to be upper body oriented on Thursday. So I have a lot of time to recover from it. So I can push distances, I can push speeds. And our Friday base is slightly higher repetition, but I can get in my acceleration based work. I can get a little bit of resisted based work. I can get some volume plyometric based work in on that day. And then when we shifted to July, we changed to a 5-day schedule in preparation for a 6-day per week camp. So it went from a 2 high day per week schedule to a 3 high day, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday high day base schedule, where that Monday still coming off of a weekend, we hit a little bit more of our max velocity work still, but the volume is a little bit down because now our 2 high days turn into a 3 high day model and trying not to overwhelm the athletes with both volume or intensity. That Wednesday turns into a little bit more of a acceleration based day. And then our Friday turns into a competition based day that has a little bit of our repeat sprintability based work in it. It also has a little bit of our small sided game orientation in it, to where when we're competing and we're trying to make sure that our athletes are competing with one another, you insert that into the training at any time to make sure that they're ready for what's coming in camp.
Right.
Yeah, you're okay. I'll keep going, honestly.
Very good. So we're in the thick of it in the off season right now. Talk about not only the progress, but talk about how you do things in the off season. How
Sure.
often does the team come in? Like just kind of take us in the day of the life of a football player at Shepherd.
Absolutely. And I'll say it again because I've said it a ton. I've been very, very blessed with my communicative with our football coaches, and the way that we've been able to structure our training week, I think has been more than I could ever ask for. Right now, we're training 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Similarly to that structure in June that we just talked about, we have 2 high days, 2 low days. Monday is an upper body day for us. When we get in here, we're hitting our bench presses, we're hitting a little bit of our push press based work, hitting upper body residuals, and it all comes based from an initial conversation after the season ended of what our team needed to be successful from our coaching staff. And I sat down with our entire staff and our head coach, and we just had a long based conversation about what we think that the players that were returning and the players that are incoming, transfers or freshmen, need to be successful from a football standpoint going into spring ball and then moving into the next season. So we want to bulk up a little tiny bit. We want to get some size on some of our guys so that Monday has a little bit of training volume in it, right? We're obviously trying to get dudes stronger and faster at all times, but the volume is where most of that is built, and trying to make sure that the dudes are eating enough. We got to throw a little bit of volume at them if they're going to gain some size. When we go to Tuesday, again, mention.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
are
No,
they
yeah, let's do it.
running before or after that lift? I know you
So
mentioned before.
on Mondays, we are free from the field, so not running at all. That Monday lift is all by itself. We are on the field on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays right now. Right now, with the way that the schedule ended up working, we set up our training around what our spring practices were going to be like. So our spring practices are ended up on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. When we get there, we'll start spring ball in about 2 weeks here. But for right now, that Tuesday, Thursday still has that spring ball oriented on field schedule. So 8:30 to 10:30, we're on the field. We have one group that trains right beforehand, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. We have a group that trains right afterwards, 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And then we have a class conflict based group that comes back in after they finish their classes from 1 to 2 p.m. ish or so. So a lot of training groups throughout the day, which means that sometimes that program gets a little bit differentiated between whether they're coming beforehand or afterwards, or a distance from it to try to make sure that they're getting both the recovery needs that they have before and after practice in order to make sure that each of those is highlighted and not negatively impacting one another. But on Tuesdays, again, for example, we have one group that goes beforehand. So they're hitting our lower body base day that has, depending on, again, the day within the week, our main lift orientation, but we're not sprinting beforehand, which is a little bit unfortunate in my mind, just thinking about trying to maximize capabilities. But in order to satisfy the schedule that we have, it has to be done the way that it has to be done. So we're hitting one of our main lower body lifts, whether it's a squat or an RDL, a trap bar deadlift, a reverse lunge, a split squat. It kind of depends on where the athletes are at within our program right now and their position bases on the back end. We hit some of our plyometric based work. We're always getting jumps on the jump mat. We hit our landing based work. We're hitting posterior chain based work, single leg based work when we're hitting most of our squatting patterns, trying to hit most of our posterior chain based patterns as our accessory work, and then it flips on the opposite day. But from my experience with Jeff Jones at Arkansas State, we talked a lot about the emphasis on making sure that our lower body gets trained like an athlete. I'm not worried about how my athletes' legs look when they pull up their short shorts on the back end. I need them to be strong and resilient to make sure that when we're playing football, I put a hard plant down to the ground and make a hard change direction. I have to push and combat somebody that's putting against me, that I'm ready for it. So even if our volume is a little tiny bit lower, it's still very easy to build strength capacities in lower volume rep ranges, maybe slightly higher intensities, but also a sub-max oriented based coach. So I truly believe that you don't have to max out your team to see strength progress, to see continual gains in strength, to see continual progression in athletic endeavors. So we spend a lot of time using sub-maximal weights. And if we're going to use sub-maximal weights, the goal is to absolutely dominate it, right? Move it as fast as I can, regardless of what the weight is, have unreal intent to move the barbell with as efficient a pattern as I can, and be as beneficial to myself by having the intent to make each individual pattern as beneficial as I possibly can and trying to create dominators. That's really what it is. So we spend a lot of time talking about intent in the weight room, intent to move stuff fast, intent to make sure that what we're doing is beneficial, and intent to make each other better. So that Tuesday, again, it's the first day of the week. Sometimes it ends up being a dynamic effort day with those submaximal type of stuff to make sure that the rest of the week doesn't get negatively impacted. I'm throwing too much stress on them, but it depends on where we're at. Wednesday's an off day for us, and that's fantastic for me right in the middle of the week after 2 hard training days. Wednesday, the athletes get their study hall in, they get to focus on their classes, they get to get a normal student life, as normal as you could be as a student athlete outside of the weight room. And I think that's very beneficial to them, especially in the middle of the week while we're here to be able to decompress a ton of it, both physiologically and psychologically, to make sure that they're ready to go on Thursdays. On Thursdays right now, again, ideally in my perfect world, we would have another low day and an upper body day. But the way that we're scheduled on the field, we have it as a high day. So I'm going out, and if our Tuesday is a max velocity day, I'm going back into the weight room. I'm hitting that opposite lower body pattern. So a hinge based pattern if we squatted on a Tuesday, a squatting based pattern if we hinged on the back end, whether it be a trap bar or a reverse lunge. Again, I'm hitting my opposite lower body based movement. I'm making sure that I'm getting that ankle to build a little bit of resilience. I'm a big rudiment series type of guy. So we go through a lot of extensive jumping patterns, a lot of deep tier plyometric based work at extensive intensities to make sure that we are covering all of our bases from a plane of motion standpoint, from a range of motion standpoint, and knowing that that day is going to be followed for that morning group by another higher intensity outside based 2 hours. The volume is dependent on what each individual athlete needs. So I'm big on being able to add a set on the back end of the day if an athlete feels like they need a little bit more volume, or we discuss that they need a little bit more volume. I'm big on set programming, coaching on a whistle. And then as the rest of the group moves on to the next one, hey, stay and hit one more set before we move on if we need one extra set. But we're out to the field after that one. And then Friday is again a upper body day finish-based work where we go back out onto the field and hit a little bit more of indie. And it kind of depends on what the coaching staff has planned for them, what we end up doing from a performance standpoint, whether it's change direction work, agility-based work, but finishing the week out on the field over there.
And you mentioned a little bit about spring ball, how you tapered off a little bit.
Yep.
What is your approach to it? Like, are you reducing volume? What is, how often are y'all lifting, the frequency? Just kind of talk about the spring ball schedule.
Yeah, so in comparison to a, let's say, 4-day week, January block winter training schedule will typically take between 1 and 2 days off of it. So training 2 to 3 days in a week, ideally 3 days a week. And that conversation still happens with the coaching staff about stress being the number one orientation that we're looking at to determine training days. So I try as much as I can to get all of our training days on days where we practice as well. So the volume tapers off, but intensity stays high. Again, you look at those training residuals to make sure that you can maintain and continue to build on what you have through the winter, through a higher stress period with higher volumes of running and higher volumes of ground contacts, higher volumes of combatives with other people. So in my opinion, it really doesn't take a whole lot to continue to make progress while the environment changes. You just have to be honed in on the things that you find important and honed in on making sure that the days emphasize those things without overwhelming the athlete. Because I think it's way, way too easy for coaches to, in so many words, burn the steak versus leave something on the table and be able to make adjustments afterwards. But it's really hard to undo overworking an athlete while it's really easy to add stress to the system if you feel like you're not giving them enough. So we match our practice days with our training-based days, and as the week progresses, as the spring ball holistic schedule changes, as we go from helmets to full padded practices to a spring game on the back end, the volume still stays relatively low, but intensities undulate a little tiny bit based off of what the athletes can recover from and based off of what we're looking to continue to build with each individual position.
Yep. And so you started in June of last year, correct?
Yes, sir.
So now we're talking about the summertime. Are kids staying around in the summertime? And then also, what do you do in the summertime with them?
Yeah. Listening to Coach Greg's podcast from earlier, I'm a big fan of Coach Greg and Harding's program in general, but similar to him, our coaching staff, our university doesn't require our athletes to stay over the summer. So it turns into a, I guess, quote unquote, free for all. The athletes that are here, I'll train the crap out of them. Some of them go home. A lot of them stay. Honestly, I think, again, it plays into the culture that Shepherd football has built and the dynamics of what it takes to be a championship level football program. And that means that sometimes kids, as Greg said, work a 8 to 4 p.m. job during the day, and they come and train at 5 p.m. at nights. And I commend them wholeheartedly for doing that. So depending on the year that we're here, and again, I only have 1 year of experience, roster size holistically on the football team can look, 90 to 110 kids. I would say somewhere between maybe 40 and 50 of those kids stay around the university, or at least they stay close enough to make a trip out to us for training during the summer, which is unbelievable and it's awesome. And talking about the schedule a little bit earlier, just to reiterate, I try to make that June schedule a little bit lower in total volume. We train 4 days a week. We move to a 5-day-a-week schedule in July, and all of that is based off of the training week and building into what we're going to do in fall practices when we get there, fall ball scheduling when we're training 6 days a week, lifting in some capacity between 2 to 3 days a week, and try to make sure that our athletes are here because, as you know, at the Division II level, particularly with fall camp, you come in, you have 16 to 20 days maybe, and then you play your first game. So practices are high intensity. They move very, very quickly. So trying to make sure that from the beginning of June to the end of July, the athletes get the volume that they're going to see from that fall camp before they see it in fall camp, when there's also more psychological stress going on. There's more intellectual need based from them, and making sure that they see what they're going to be asked to do, so that when it comes to that time frame, the physical portion doesn't end up being the limiting factor, and they can focus on the psychological aspect of football, the tactical, technical aspects of where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there, so the coaching staff can refine what we have to do from a schematic standpoint to make sure that we win week number 1 to week number 15.
So everyone's favorite topic, like I mentioned earlier, the in-season part. You kind of hit on it a little bit, but kind of go, again, your approach to in-season.
Absolutely.
What you're doing differently.
So whether our guys are playing or not is the number one differentiator between how often we're training here at Shepherd. And I, again, am more than happy to have experienced a lot of sports within my time in strength and conditioning, because I stole the concept a little bit from basketballs. I stole the concept a little bit from volleyballs on the back end. But during the season, I try to separate out our team into high minute players and low minute players. And that includes special teams guys, that includes our starters, our backups, and whether or not we're training on a particular day can be dependent on how much gameplay I got during that weekend. So we're a program that trains on Sundays, the day afterwards. Obviously, that looks a little tiny bit different if I played the entire game the day before, or if I didn't at all. I sat on the sidelines and played, 3 snaps on special teams, or I didn't play at all and I'm redshirting on the back end. So Sundays, depending on what that Saturday looked like, can be a high day or a low day for our guys. I'm a big movement is medicine type of guy. So the guys that did play a ton, I still love to get in and do isometric based work. I love Alex Natera's work. I love Jake Tura's work. And we come in and we try to build some tissue resilience through tendinous adaptation of isometric work. I can get some upper body training in on that day because it's not necessarily taxing on my central nervous system, but trying to make sure that that day pushes the emphasis on recovery through movement for the guys that played. And the guys that didn't play, I would love to train on a Saturday for us, but something very interesting about Shepherdstown in general, our game field does not have any lights on it. So the PSAC, all of our games, we play at noon. So our low minute guys, even if they're not playing, we're still required to be at the field by about 8 o'clock. And even though I would love to get a 6 a.m. group, it's a Saturday, and I don't really want to wake the dudes up at 6 a.m. to train on the back end. So when we come in and train on Sundays, that's our high intensity day. That's our gameplay dictated day. We also have a practice on that day, and it still differentiates between the high minute guys and the low minute guys, or the high snap guys, the low snap guys, what gets done on in that practice. But our low snap guys at practice, we're taking team reps. We're playing a little bit of 11 on 11 or 7 on 7. So that day is a day where we sprint. That day is a day where we jump. That day is a day where we hit lower body work. Monday is off for our entire team, which is great. That first day of the week is always tough for athletes from a school standpoint, especially coming off of a weekend and being realistic about what college athletics is for a lot of student athletes. I love having a Monday off for them because it gives them the opportunity to refresh their brain for the week that's ahead. Tuesday for everybody then ends up being another high-based day. That is technically the last training day of the week for our high-minute guys. So we train Sundays and Tuesdays. I do have a primer-based day on a Friday, the day before a game, where we go out and on our football field, but right before practice, we hit some overcoming isometric-based work up against a wall. We throw some med balls around. We have some fun with some bands. We get a little bit of a pump, but you try to get them feeling good 24 hours out, trying to get them feeling like an athlete in some capacity and moving some light loads really fast, waking up the central nervous system to try to make sure that that post-activation potentiation, quote unquote, effect gets pushed to that Saturday game the next day. But our low minute guys are also training and also having a really hard training day on that day because everybody's going to experience that same practice afterwards. That Tuesday practice is probably the hardest practice of the week for us. So we're trying to make sure that those guys get that same stimulus from the weight room on that same day. Wednesday, our low minute guys are training again, and we're hitting an upper body day. 2 days back to back, we get easy bench press based work. I'm not throwing too much except for maybe accessory-based work, lower body work at them, trying to make sure that they can recover from the day before, both from a practice standpoint and from a training standpoint, but we're still coming in and getting training. And then, again, I was lucky enough for our low-minute guys to get a additional lift. So right now, or this past season, we trained 4 days a week. Could not be more happy about it. That Friday ended up being a total body day for us, depending on whether or not we knew they were going to play or not. If they're a special teams guy, the volume ends up being a little tiny bit lower on the back end. If they're a redshirt based guy, we're getting after it. We're doing exactly what we want to do to continue to build our athletic endeavors. We're sprinting, we're jumping, we're hitting some lower body work and having some fun.
Awesome. And so what metrics are you using to evaluate your athletes?
Yep. So I am, again, very sprint oriented. So everything from a fly 10 with a 30-yard build to a 10-yard dash. And that includes 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 fly 10s with a 10-yard build, a 20-yard build, a 30-yard build, etc. I love curvilinear based running. And when I can get out onto the football field, we share it with the lacrosse team. So all the lacrosse lines are on there. So I have some curvilinear based work that I can run around. And when I got to Shepherd, one of the initial things that I tried to push to both our administration and our coaching staff was the inclusion of a data-oriented based system so that we can keep track of whether or not the things that we're doing for training and the things that the athletes are experiencing from training and practice are working for us to continue to build what we want to build, which is holistic athletes. And that means that we need some sort of technology. So I was lucky enough to get a Brower timing gate, which is awesome. I also have a makeshift Amazon-based skills timing gate, which if you're a coach on a budget, that is a unreal benefit to you. It costs about $130 on Amazon. It's not always the most accurate in comparison to the Brower, but it's a way to get athletes competing against one another. It's a
And what's that called again?
Skills, so SKLZ. They're a company that has been around for a very, very long time. They do everything from ladders to hurdles. And I think maybe within the past 3 to 4-ish years, they created this timing gate. It's a red light laser that one end connects to the other, just like your dasher system, just like almost any linear-based sprint timing gate. And again, the only thing that I'll say about it is sometimes it can be a little bit inaccurate. Sometimes if you move a little bit too fast in between runs, it takes a little bit of a delay on the back end. It's battery powered. So if that tells you anything, you get what you get for the price that you have, but it does an unreal job for us, especially if I'm inside and I have multiple teams training at the same time. One wants to use the Brower and the other one doesn't have anything. If I want to try to make that a high day, unreal way to make sure that I can still get what I need from a sprinting standpoint, and that's competitive nature and intent to move as fast as I can by throwing metrics out there. I was lucky enough to get Team Builder as well, right? So I use Team Builder to keep track of everything that we do, from a calf raise weight to our jumps, to our sprints, to the weights that we have. And that's an unreal system. And I'll give a shout out to Brian Spatowski, who is a current coach at Elon, also a worker at Team Builder. Technically, I think he's the CSM, or maybe he might even be up a little bit further in the totem pole now. But he introduced me to this job at Shepherd, and he's one of the reasons why I'm here, because Shepherd was using Team Builder before I got here. And that system has been an unreal help for us from a continuity standpoint and a generational based consistency with programming, because everybody knows exactly where they have to go. All the athletes can download the app on their phone. So I'm not worried about whether or not emails are there. I know whether or not athletes are registered, whether they have accounts, whether they see what I'm giving them in times that they're away and times that we're here, and I can keep track of everything that gets done, and it's awesome. Also have a plyomat, which is great for us. Only have one of them, but it does the trick for all of our teams, and you center your training around the things that are important. So I'm looking to track jump numbers. I'm looking to make sure that that's in our training all the time. And from a technology standpoint, I think the only thing that we're missing that I would love would be some catapult type stuff. I would love to get some GPS based unit. I think that's next on the list for us while we're there. But I try to do enough at practices for the teams when I can make it out there to make sure that we still get what we need from that monitoring standpoint, even if it's just from that human eye.
Yep, another big part of the Division II level is nutrition. Talk about what y'all do at Shepherd for nutrition.
Absolutely. When I got here, again, nutrition was one thing that I tried to emphasize to our coaches can be an X factor within our athletes' longevity and success in collegiate athletics. So the initial conversation ended up being about how we can try to help our student athletes get more information about nutrition from our cafe department, from our Rams Den, from our general nutrition based in the university. And through some conversations with both our coaching staffs, with some of our student athletes, with our SAC program here, we were able to come up with some money to create a nutrition station right outside of the weight room, which again is an unbelievable blessing. And it's very, very simple, right? Fruit snacks, goldfish, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, granola bars. And that's right now the extent of it, but we have enough money to make sure that that gets consistently provided to the athletes, because the day-to-day life of a student athlete can be so hectic and it can be so sporadic that sometimes they don't get a chance to go over to our CAF. They don't get a chance to use the facilities that the university provides to them for getting enough calories within a day. And as unfortunate as it sounds, right, sometimes a peanut butter and jelly sandwich can be the difference between whether or not an athlete has something go wrong at a practice. Because if I didn't eat in the morning and then I'm asked to sprint as fast as I can, jump as high as I can for 2.5 hours, things are unfortunately bent on potentially going wrong. So trying to provide our athletes with something that's simple, something that's quick, something that's easily digestible to them, whether they're coming in before practice or leaving from the weight room to go home. Simple was the key for us. And our athletic director was 100% on board. Our student athletes have absolutely crushed it when it comes to utilizing it, which is fantastic for me from a longevity standpoint, and trying to make sure that it continually elevates across the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and it only goes up from here. But you try to emphasize it at the end of every training session, every time you get to talk to the athletes, that even though we get to spend 2, 3, 4 hours together, there's a lot of time outside that has a lot of impact on the things that we do and the things that your coaches are doing with you. And if we can be a small aid in that by providing you with 250 to 500 calories pre or post, I'll absolutely take that every time.
Yep, and another great thing you do is social media. Talk about your social media presence and how it affects really your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Hunter Lakey at Georgia Southern right now was the social media wizard at Elon when we were there. He was an intern for us, and now he's an assistant director over there. And a lot of the stuff, I will not lie, gets copied from a lot of the stuff that he does. But I think we live in an era of the world in general right now where athletes and social media are synonymous. And even though it can be difficult for us to videotape and coach at the same time, I think you get a lot of utilization and a lot of positive benefits out of putting your athletes out there to the world for them to see the work that they're putting in. And that's really the number one emphasis from it. When I got to Shepherd, I was helping with the social media presence at Elon, and Elon already had a huge social media presence by the time I got there. And again, I commend Jordan Newsma and Nick DeMarco and everybody that's on that staff before I got there for utilizing social media as a platform to elevate both their staff and their presence within the field. But when I got here, that was one thing that I just tried to emulate. We were helping run the social media content over there. All the coaches had a day within the week or a week within the month to post consistently. So you create a culture of posting consistently, and then you get to a new place and you say, hey, these athletes have never experienced being put on show for everybody to see the work that they're putting in. Why wouldn't I do something like this? So right now I try to post as honestly often as I can. I try to get some sort of film out for our athletes, and it helps me when I can record something in the training and I can see something that's happening in it. I can show it right to the athlete, right? Vocal cues for our athletes are the number one utilized tool for all coaches, probably all around the world. But if you can show an athlete what they're doing as well as speaking to them about what they're doing, if you have the time, that works tremendously well as well. And you get to refine your coaching tools, your coaching strategies by utilizing a visual effect while you're there too. Because then you can enhance both the quality of feedback that you're giving to them and the future of their athletic department by showing athletes that this is the standard that we have and this is what's wrong. This is going on social media for people to see, or let's do another set and I'll record it again. And if you want it to go on social media, I'll put it on social media this time, which is also awesome. And gets to show some competitive nature within our athletes. And again, I think athletes want to be put on display. Everybody loves, and we try to create a culture of competitiveness here. And so I'm competing not only to be the best version of myself, not only to be the best team in the nation, but I'm also competing with someone else to be put on social media. And if that gives an athlete a reason to perform, I'll take it too.
Awesome. And so a couple quick questions here before we end up. What is on the typical playlist for all the athletes at Shepherd?
Great question. That absolutely varies depending on the team. Anything from peace to alternative rock to young boy. I am not a coach that runs the aux by myself. I try to give our athletes some autonomy with it, and I try to choose individual athletes per day to pick the playlist for the day. Sometimes it's based off of whether or not they've been a fantastic culture builder for the team, whether they've been a great athlete, whether they've had a great training session. Sometimes it's because I know you're going to pick something wild and it's going to throw the entire team off for a little bit, and I want to see how they respond. So from a variety standpoint, I'll say the volleyball team probably has our most variety of music played, but it depends on the team. I listen to a lot of hip hop on the day, right? You know that from being in collegiate athletics. I listen to a lot of rap. I listen to a lot of Young Boy. I listen to a lot of Lil Baby.
It gets old.
And sometimes it gets old. And just on the topic, because it came into my mind, right? When my athletes ask me what I like to listen to when I have my own free time, I tell them I don't listen to music because I listen to music 24/7 when I'm coaching. And that's a lot. So I listen to podcasts or I listen to people talk. And if I don't, sometimes I just listen to country music because it's smooth, because it's nice, because it's flowy.
What hacks or things you wish you would have known sooner as a strength coach?
Yeah, I think your athletes are your number one asset when you can't coach. If you coach your athletes to coach each other, they will run sessions for you. They can do a lot of things that you don't necessarily think you can do. If you put the culture out there and the standard of athletes being responsible for one another into your teams, they will coach each other a lot. They will have high expectations for one another a lot. I think having personality as a coach is a substantial hack. You have to laugh with your athletes. You can yell at your athletes, but you can also make jokes with your athletes. You have to be a really, really good person. And having athletes enjoy your presence as a person will help you not only coach them harder, but connect better with them in the future. So showing that you're both a person and the coach, I think, is the ultimate hack. Really, you don't always have to be that same person you are when you're coaching. Because I have very, very high expectations for my athletes. I have very, very high standards for the way that we do things. And a lot of the athletes know that if that something isn't going right and they're doing something wrong, that I will call them out in front of the entire team. I'll stop all the music. I'll make sure that everything is centered around them, and I will make sure that you do everything as perfectly as we can. But right afterwards, I'll come up and I'll tell you that I love you so much that I don't want to see you fail. And that's why I did that, right? I love everything about the team and I love everything about the student athletes. But if I was going to just let that go by the wayside, then I would be doing you wrong. I would not be doing something right for you as a person, for you as a husband later on, for you as a partner to somebody, for you and your children, if I just let you go by. So I'll coach the crap out of you, and then I'll come and hug you right afterwards.
And then lastly, any shout outs you want to give?
Shout out to Corey Mason. Shout out to the boys that I love. Shout out to Brian Svatowski, Christian French, Andrew Benham, Hunter Lakey. I'll give a shout out to my lovely friends that have spread out across the country that helped me out tremendously in the past, just being a great person. I have multiple weddings to go to this year. So congratulations to Oscar Barraza. Congratulations to Devin Koppas. Congratulations to the guys that I know are continuing to make impacts in careers. John Waters is a guy that moved from Elon to Arkansas State to St. Olaf now at the Division III level, that I'll be at his wedding in July. And I could not be more happy for the people that I worked with at Elon. Nick DeMarco, Jordan Newsma, and I already said their names, but Brandon Robinson, Jeff Davison, Alex Brzeski, everybody that's there. Cam Ringstead, because I lived with him for a long while. He's the ultimate man. And I won't say any more, but if I missed any names, I'm sorry. I love you guys.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining, Coach.
Thanks, Colton. I appreciate you.
Thank you for tuning in, and if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. You can also follow us on Instagram for more updates at Under the Barbell Strength Podcast, and if you know someone who would love this episode, please share it with them.